Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of Supporting Siblings. My name's Bree, and we are now approaching the final stages of our journey together in this 5-part series. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we're joining from today and pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining this webinar today. I'm joining today from the lands of the Murrumarang people on Yuin Nation. I do encourage you to share in the chat if you know what lands you're joining from. So over the past 3 sessions, we've built a strong foundation, understanding the sibling experience, nurturing relationships and resilience, and exploring siblings' roles, both now and in the future. Today, we're going to expand on that focus beyond the family home and look at how siblings can thrive in their school and their community environments. So every sibling of a child with disability deserves the chance to flourish, not just within the loving support of their family, but also at school, with friends, and in the wider community. Yet sometimes siblings can feel invisible in these settings, or their unique needs and experiences can go unrecognized by the very people and organizations that play important roles in their lives. So today we are talking about school and community connections. And it's going to be practical ways to help siblings feel seen, supported, and connected beyond the family home. So excited to have Shannon back. Shannon has been in our previous session and brings both that professional expertise and some personal insights. And we're also joined by Sammy. So welcome. Sammy is also a parent who brings some valuable lived experience to this conversation. So you guys are going to guide us through a bit of a conversation and hopefully some strategies for advocating for sibling needs in those school settings, partnering effectively with those educators to support the sibling wellbeing. I'm assuming we might be talking about some formal and informal supports and creating opportunities for siblings to build some really meaningful peer connections outside the home. And I guess these are really, really important topics because siblings spend a significant portion of their lives in the community and at school. And when these environments understand and support their experience, it can make a huge difference to their sense of belonging and well-being. So I'm going to stop talking because we're here to hear from you guys, and I'll hand it over to you both.
Thank you so much, Bree, and thank you for having us here today. Sammy and I are both joining from Ghanaland in Adelaide, so Ninamani. That's hello in the Ghana language. Thank you all for joining us today. When we first started talking about running this session, Bree, and we were talking about who I might be in conversation with, Sammy was the person who just immediately sprang to mind. So thank you so much, Sammy, for being here today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you about the experiences of your family and what's worked and maybe what hasn't worked so well in schools to give other parents who are on the call a bit of a sense of things that they can be doing to make sure that their sibling children are getting that support sort of from all different angles. But I wondered, Sammy, would you mind starting with a bit of an introduction of yourself and your family so that people have that context?
Sure. And thank you, Bree, and thanks, Shan, for the opportunity. And it's wonderful that there are webinars like this. I know that I would have absolutely loved to have something like this probably, 5, 6, maybe 8 years ago. So it's brilliant that we've got this, that you've developed this relationship and we're creating this resource and this platform. So a bit about myself for those listening is blessed. I have 3 beautiful children, have 2 healthy girls, Coco, who is 15, almost 16. So if anyone's in teenage land yet, just prepare yourself. And then also to Gigi, who is 13, and my youngest is Francis, but we call him Frank. He was born with congenital heart defect, open heart surgery, had hypoxic brain damage. So he also now has 3 types of epilepsy, vision impairment, speech delay, a whole world of things. And he now goes to a special school. So that's our family, a very supportive, lovely husband, but it is just us. All of our extended family are interstate. So talking about that support piece, that's a bit of what our family unit looks like.
Thanks, Sammy. I remember the first time you and I met, you came into my office for I can't even remember 100% the context of why we were meeting originally. But there were some stories you told me specifically around Coco and Gigi's experiences in school that have really, really stuck with me. And, you know, we hear so many stories, we deal with so many families. But there were some specific things that you spoke about Coco and Gigi's schooling experience that was sort of that, oof, yes, this is why we're here, this is why we are doing what we're doing type moment. Would you mind sharing some of those type of stories with our audience today?
Yeah, sure. So I think that was me, Shan. I saw that you were the CEO of Siblings. I was acutely aware. I was very fortunate that when I had my son, I had a really good friend who was a clinical psychologist, and she said, I know you haven't got time to read, but I want to give you this book. And it was the Siblings book. So it was always on my radar. So when I saw you and we were connected, I think I reached out and probably pushed myself in to have a coffee with you. So that's probably
Love it.
how it happened.
Thank you so much for that.
So look, I think also too, depending on your siblings and where your child with special needs falls, I think also too plays a role in obviously the outcomes and different experiences they have. So I know, for instance, my eldest daughter sees things very differently to how my middle daughter sees things. But both obviously elder siblings of my son. So Coco, she experienced some really troubling things. They all went to a local government school that was walking distance from our home. So we were relocated from the country down to the city because we needed to be near specialist, not only specialist care within hospitals, but also to specialist therapists, which I'm sure many of you listening feel the same. So unfortunately, in regional areas, we have beautiful people with great intentions, but they might be generalists, and sometimes our kids need specific care. So we moved, and we moved specifically to be close to the hospital, and also to in a school environment where all three kids could thrive. That was my intention. So they had I thought at the time and believed that they had the right supports to support all three children. And I suppose getting on the inside of that, we learnt very, very quickly firsthand that if Coco and Gigi, or they probably learnt really quickly that they needed to be really acutely aware of what was going on with their little brother. And that became very apparent in I suppose, the stresses and the outbursts that happened at home, because they were constantly on. They were on in that real caregiver mode at school when I wasn't there, obviously working. So I think that probably a couple of the stories I shared was around the fact that I'll never forget one day. Oh, there's many, but I'll never forget the day that, you know, especially with my eldest, that she felt that even though that we had advocated for my son to have one-to-one support in a government school, which is not easy, which I'm sure many people would understand, is she felt that she had to walk around. She got to know what those one-to-one supports actually looked like, and the care they provided. So she took on a role of understanding the depth of their knowledge and understanding of our son's sort of needs and disability, and she would follow certain ones around at her lunchtime and recess. So basically, she wasn't being a kid at school. She wasn't going off playing carefree, having a lunch and then swinging over here, or participating on the oval with her friends, or whatever it is that they do at different ages and stages of their life. So I know that was really confronting for her. I know, for instance, another story is with my middle one, is and this one was something that I think is even hard for me to even sort of share again, and not because it's hard for me to share. It's hard for me to understand how it actually happened. And basically, my son had gone to the toilet, and he needs help with going to the toilet. And I think at the time, the particular carer was basically wanting him to toilet himself. So we're talking just a number one. Whereas we had specifically for him to go with two support workers or a teacher and a carer to go to the all accessible toilet. sent him into the boys' toilets, and basically he didn't have the ability or the mobility or the core support to pull himself together after going to the bathroom. And at the time, some boys were in there and started laughing. And then, would you believe, those particular boys were in Gigi's ear and came back into the classroom and were laughing about the fact that they'd seen what had unfolded in the bathroom. And she then excused herself. So she was in year 3. My son was in year 1. She somehow excused herself to the teacher and took a buddy and said, I need to go see my brother. So this is in school time. She excused herself and then took herself off to the year 1 classroom, knocked on the door, and then said to the year 1 teacher, I need to speak to my brother. I need to speak to Frank. And then pulled him out and chatted to him to check he was okay and fix him up. And she never shared that with me. I just got an email from the year 1, an email from the year 1 teacher, not from her teacher, from the year 1 teacher to say, I'm not sure what happened today, but basically Gigi came with a little friend and knocked on the door and pulled Frank out, but I just thought I should let you know. And by this stage, the kids were home. I picked them up and I'm reading this email and going, what's going on? And then going into Gigi's room and said, darling, did something happen today? And she shared it all with me. And that's what I mean. As an adult sitting here now talking about it, I think the fact that in year 3, she's recognising that she had to go in and check on the wellbeing and safety of her brother when there was supports and adults around. And then the fact that they still didn't understand what had happened. So then I had to find out, then email back to the school, and then from there I actually asked to see the wellbeing counsellor to basically to talk about what we're talking about today, to make sure those supports were in place, not only for my son. That was a different conversation. This was a conversation about making sure that my daughters didn't feel that they didn't have someone to go to support them.
And I think that's the thing when you talk about these stories, obviously terrible for Frank, but your girls at 8 or, however old Coco was when she was checking in on making sure that the support workers were sort of up to standard and doing the right thing. That's incredibly heartbreaking that the adults who were in the room with Frank weren't providing that support and the girls were having to take on those responsibilities.
And I think that's right, Shan. And I think the other part of that was I can share this with you, and I can share this obviously with Bree and obviously the forum here today. But I remember even being as a parent and sharing it with other parents, and other parents not really understanding what the problem was with that. And that even in itself was confronting. And that's what I mean, just sharing it now is probably the first time I probably shared it in a forum where probably I feel heard, or the level of angst and stress that placed on me, that I had to be not only just in front of every step with my son, but I had to be in front of every step with my girls, which we do anyway as parents. But it was that next level.
Yeah, and that's really something at Siblings Australia that we're very switched on to whenever there is opportunities to participate in any sort of consultation around education, departments for education. We are just hammering in. It's not just about looking after the child with a disability. Sibling children have these sort of additional requirements. They have these additional things that they've got going on, and please don't assume that your teachers or your support staff are actually skilled enough to recognise that as a default and not be calling them in. We hear at Siblings Australia about sibling children being pulled out of class by teachers because, can you just come in? Your brother's dysregulated at the moment. We really need some help on bringing him back on track and disrupting the sibling child's education to be doing that sort of role. It's insane. Can you think of any time, Sammy, where you'd had a teacher or some sort of support person at school who's just really got that sibling experience for Coco and Gigi and the impact that that's had on their education?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to be honest and say they are few and far between. Unfortunately, I have to say that there isn't many. So yes, I can think of straight away. So if I think of Frank's experience with going to kindy, I was just really blessed, and I still see it as a blessing that the kindy director was a heart mum. And so she had been through the journey that we had gone through. Obviously, it looked a bit different, but completely understood the journey that we'd been on with open heart surgery, the development delays, and so forth. We didn't know then that Frank had a full intellectual disability. And she was amazing in the respect that everyone else that I'd said, we don't know what Frank looks like, is in the respect of he's still reaching milestones, just a lot slower. He's developmentally delayed, but we didn't have the firm diagnosis of intellectual disability at that stage, and we hadn't actually kicked off with our epilepsy journey. And she was just so wonderful in saying, look, this can be quite confronting for many people, and even the kindy teachers. How do you feel about me doing a bit of an education piece? How about I get an ambulance to visit the kindy? And the kindy was on site at the school. And I said, do you know what, that would be great. But that would be great for so many. And they just had a little airlock gate. So they were very close to the schoolyard. So it was great in the respect that more kids could kind of see the ambulance come to the school. So I was really, really grateful for that. And then I was really grateful, literally probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks later, Frank developed epilepsy and actually left the school in an ambulance after having having a seizure at school, which so that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the fact that she was willing and wanted to support, and was probably the most I had felt supported. Then I would probably skip over the rest of primary school and say the next kind of level of support came for my girls when they went to high school, when they shared that they were a sibling. They had teachers say, I understand, I'm a sibling too. And those relationships, even though those teachers don't always teach my daughters, they are the first people that are checking in on my daughters, or Frank's had to have a couple of surgeries, or there's been a couple of hospital admissions. They're the teachers that just whoomp, they just go straight to my girls without me even having to say. I usually let the wellbeing coordinator know what's happening in our world, but they're the teachers that are just right there checking in. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I think we're kind of probably alluding to the fact that lived experience is key, unfortunately.
And we can't always have that for the other adults in our kiddos' lives, unfortunately. In terms of, you've obviously done a lot of advocacy for your girls and support for them in the school environment. Do you think of particular forms of advocacy or ways you've approached schools that have been really effective, or perhaps things that you look back on and go, oh, that was going to be terrible from the get-go. I shouldn't have even bothered with that.
Yeah, plenty of those trial and error moments. I suppose the thing that I learnt probably quickly was exactly that not everyone was going to be receptive to conversations. I learnt quickly that documenting things, and when I say documenting things, I'm not talking War and Peace. I just had a notebook, and I just had a notebook that I just kept really handy close by when I had different interactions, or if there was people I had to follow up on. And I suppose what I will say is that the thing that I experienced was there was a lot of times when people that were in positions of power weren't always giving me the opportunity to have a support person, or even full visibility on a meeting that they wanted me to be participating in, or they were happy to sort of make comments in the playground or drop off and pick up. And as most people know, trying to get 3 kids out the door, 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, special needs, no special needs, neurodivergence, whatever it looks like, out the door and then turn up for work is a challenge at the best of times. So just even to get to school was sort of a big feat. And then what I was finding is they were then firing questions at me, and I was probably answering quickly without context or whatever else, and then I'd find that then would be misinterpreted or whatever else because it was a quick interaction. So I suppose from that, I then paused and said, if you'd like to follow up, would you like to have a meeting? If you like, I could come a bit earlier for pickup on this particular day. So then I suppose I tried to set the tone for the interactions or conversations, because I felt a couple of times things were misinterpreted, especially when you're talking about therapists coming into the school or having sort of Chinese whispers. So that was one thing, but I just made sure I had that notebook. And at the time, I think the notebook actually ended up living in my car, because that was just where it lived. And then I started to really sort of say, okay, I can have this meeting, and can you please let me know what you'd like to cover off? And tried to sort of get them to put forward what they were going to discuss first, because I felt that I was so far in it that there were times that, to your point, Shan, I would go home that night and speak to my husband and go, oh, I forgot to say this, or what they didn't realise is that had happened, or whatever else. And so that would be my big sort of takeaway would be, have things documented, and wherever you can, ensure that you're well prepared before these meetings take place. And sort of, I liken it to, don't get door stopped. You're not a politician. They're not there to door stop you. Like, sort of pause and say, sure, I'm more than happy to discuss this, but can we discuss it at a time where I've actually got the space, and vice versa, because I just felt that a lot of things were just shooting from the hip, and we just kept going around in circles.
Yeah, great rule for life too. Love that. If you could sort of, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to educators about supporting siblings, what would you want them to know?
I think the biggest piece of advice is to keep the consistent line of communication open. Check on them at all times, not just when there's a time of crisis in the family. Check that they feel supported. Actively listen to them. What so many people aren't realising is, or educators don't always understand, is, like you said, that they're looking at the particular child that needs the support in that regulation piece. What they're also too not recognising is that these siblings don't always get a full night's sleep either. They're not coming to school with a beautiful, seamless rainbows and sunshine morning. Do you know what I mean? They've played a part in regulating. They haven't had a chance to even dysregulate themselves as kids. They've actually had to put their needs aside and play into the regulation of the child with needs to get out the door. So they're already on well and truly before any other child has turned up to that classroom door. So my advice would be to ensure that there is that constant just touch point and understanding that even though that sibling might be going through a healthy patch, that healthy patch is still doesn't look like a normal day in that home. And my biggest thing is, that's the bit that I look back on, is how much lack of sleep my girls had. And I look back at different gaps in their education. It really comes just off the basis that they didn't get a full night's sleep, and so they didn't get a chance to really look at their homework, or when they came home they were just tired, and for me, I didn't place that pressure on them to, just have a meal together, cuddle on the couch and try and go to sleep. Do you know what I mean? I think it's making sure that we're constantly checking in on the support that they need all the time, not just in times of crisis.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, were there informal supports that have made a difference? So you've said that you don't have extended family around you, but friends or community groups that have been really important in making sure that Coco and Gigi have felt connected outside of sort of what's happening in your home.
I think I've had to really seek them, if I have to be honest, Shan, and hence probably barging into your office, um, stalking you on LinkedIn. I've had to really seek that out, and I suppose I've taken on that role of being their advocate, to seek out so that there is that support. We've chosen to financially take the hit now and put them into a private school with a wellbeing program with on-site psychologists. That has been that's a decision that my husband and I have made, because we're both working parents, because we need to be financially, and we have the supports around Frank with the help of the NDIS. But I've had to seek out those supports. So obviously one being Siblings Australia, and that's given my girls validation. It's grown their confidence. It's given them opportunities that they would not have had exposure to, which will set them up, I have no doubt in my mind. But I think that's really been it. It's been seeking out the support in Siblings Australia, and also to seeking out the right high school to support them, because I'll be honest, I don't think there is anything else. I'm open to hearing if there are more areas of support that are open to them, but because, as I said, we don't have family. Again, they don't have friends over because of their son, because of my son, I should say, because of whether or not they're going to be bullied or ridiculed because of however he acts or whatever else. So they don't always get that break. They don't have grandparents they can go and have a sleepover with, or aunties or uncles. It is very much just us. So I suppose that's why we made that decision to go. We will take the financial burden on, to give them at least a school that,
Yeah.
when they're there, it's theirs. It's only theirs. Don't get me wrong, doesn't stop them from still being Frank's big sisters, but it's an all-girls school. Again, this is just a choice. We just did this because they had a great wellbeing program. But they can just be themselves. They're sisters. It's just it's their space, and it's opportunities that we can't give them.
Brilliant. I know one of the things for sibling children is, and I think, particularly for kids, because your world opens up the older you get, obviously, but for sibling children, there's often that thought of, I'm the only person who's going through this. Have you girls had the opportunity to meet other siblings, and how has that sort of changed their views, I suppose, of that experience of being a sibling?
Yes. So I suppose when they got their first exposure to being a sibling, was when Frank went to a special school. So we unfortunately had to leave the government system. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure in different states and territories, there's other practices in place. Unfortunately, the experience we had wasn't great. So we left the government system, and we've now gone to a private special school. And from there, I suppose they got their first experience in meeting the siblings of Frank's friends. And from there, I suppose it gave them sort of insight to exactly that. They're not alone. They, they all have to lock their doors from their siblings at times. They all have different ways in which they tune out to, I suppose, cope. They have different coping mechanisms and skills that they use. I think the thing, and then obviously now siblings, but I think, Shan, with that, one thing that even Coco even said to me just this past week when I shared a story, which is a good friend of mine has a little one there's two girls, and the eldest has autism, and the little sister doesn't understand why her big sister doesn't want to play with her, and she's really struggling. And she'd asked if Coco would come over and babysit her and play with her and sort of play that sort of big sister role. And but basically it didn't end well, in the respect of the elder daughter, who has autism, locked herself in a room and didn't want anyone coming into the home. And when I came and told Coco, you won't be babysitting tonight, this is what's happened, her eyes welled up and she said, I know Gigi annoys me. She said, but I think about it every day, Mum. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky we have each other. And I think that's the thing that can sometimes make or break families and siblings, is either that bond is there or they just want to escape from it. So I know that now Coco has a different reflection on what it's like to be a sibling, and she feels very blessed that she has her sister, even though they fight. Like, they're both 13 and 16, let's face it. This morning was horrendous if I told you what happened, but yeah.
I'm very conscious of the time, but I do have one more question that I do want to jump in with before we finish up. As Bree said, I haven't been great at pulling these conversations in really tight, but there's so much that you have given, I think, to our audience today. So hugely grateful for that. But if there was one tip that you could give to parents trying to support their sibling child at school or in the community, what would it be?
I think it's to, and it's so easy for me to say now, and I know that I know I didn't do it, and I wish I had the support, like I said, or I wish I had exposure to things like this all those years ago, is time, to make time for my siblings, to make that time to, even if it was just, hey, I know it seems mundane, but do you want to just come grocery shopping, just you and me together? So at least we're having that chat in the car. We're at the grocery shop, we might be able to stop and get a quick hot chocolate or something. I wish I did more of that. Instead, I think I kind of pushed my kids into, I didn't push, but sport. I sort of, so that they had something outside of our home, so at least they could go out and swim or play football or do something and kind of get that release, which they, don't get me wrong, they're grateful for. But I think at the end of the day, they just want us. They want the person that knows them most and knows them intimately and genuinely sees them and sees the struggle. So it would be time, would be the thing, is it, even if it's just 15 minutes, set the alarm on your phone and do it when hopefully your child is, your child with needs is asleep or whatever it is. It's so hard for me to say, Shan, because as you know, everyone's household looks different, but that would be the thing, is I wish I made more time, one-on-one time with them.
Yeah, time in the car, I think, is just incredible. I know my stepson is a sibling child, and when we're driving, he will just, and I think it's that thing, it's an intimate space, but you're not doing eye contact or anything. And I'll come home and I'll say to his dad, right, he's got this, and this going on in his life, and we sort of need to be. And his dad will look at me and go, how on earth did you get that out of him? I'm like, we went for a drive, right? We drove to the shops or whatever. And I'm like, and in that time. So yeah, the running those little errands can create those pockets that are just invaluable in a life that is pretty chaotic sometimes.
Hectic, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sammy. This has been incredible. I sent you a list of questions that I had prior to this webinar.
I haven't looked at them.
Yeah, look, I hardly looked at them either, but I have looked at them just now and gone, oh, we did not get through half of this. There was so much in that. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your generosity and honesty in talking about your family's experience. I know that people have gotten so much out of this, Bree.
Absolutely. And there has been some comments in the chat just around how valuable it has been to hear those experiences. And it's been such a good webinar. So thank you so much to both of you. I don't think there's any questions. I'll just double check.
Seem to be more, this
Yes.
is really, really relevant to our
Yeah,
lives.
yeah, and
So,
a copy. Yeah, so the one of the questions has been around the recording, so the recording will be emailed out in the coming days. But I really do hope that those watching are feeling a little bit more confident about advocating for their siblings' needs and more aware of maybe some resources and connections that might be available in their own communities. Sometimes it's just knowing what questions to ask and how to start those conversations that makes all the difference. Um, but yeah, I think again, in all of these sessions, the message that comes through so clearly is that siblings don't have to navigate the experiences alone. There are people in schools, communities, and support service who want to help. We might have to dig a little deeper to find them. But sometimes they just need to understand what siblings need and how they can contribute. Um, as I said, those who have registered will receive today's recording in the coming days, and any additional resources. I have put the details for our next session in the chat, but that will also come out in the email. But it is sibling support in medically complex families. And I think just remember that building these school and community connections takes time. Don't feel pressure to tackle everything at once. Start with one conversation, one connection, or one opportunity and build from there. So, thank you everyone so much for joining us today and for your ongoing commitment to supporting siblings in all areas of their lives. And by creating these broader networks of supports, it's actually giving your children the foundation they need to thrive wherever they are. So, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Sammy. It was lovely to meet you, Sammy. We're really looking forward to our final session next week. Until then, please take these ideas one step at a time and remember that every connection you help create is expanding your child's world in a positive way. So thank you so much. Have a lovely Tuesday, and we'll see everyone next week, same time, same place. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.